Just like Charlotte, North Carolina is just fine, that's where Iryna was senselessly and brutally stabbed to death on public transit. We saw that horrible video. The House Judiciary Committee held a field hearing there today where both residents and families of victims railed against the city's cashless bail policies. Now, you might wonder how many Democrats bothered to show up for that hearing. The answer is 2.
I've lived in Charlotte back and forth during my life since I was 6 years old. I'm telling you,
I know
I don't
that
feel
you are.
safe.
This cashless bail system is a joke.
Begging for her hero, her father, me, that couldn't be there. She was 5'3". She weighed 115 pounds. Bang! Dead. Gone. Why? Because Alexander Devontae Dickey, who was arrested 39 goddamn times, 25 felonies, was on the street. How about that?
Logan Federico, say her name. That's the man's daughter, who was murdered in a bedroom by a career criminal. Democrats, say her name. Do you know her name? That was in South Carolina. And the solicitor in South Carolina won't even call that father.
North Carolina Congressman and House Judiciary Committee member Mark Harris was at today's hearing, unlike some others, and he joins us now. Congressman, it's good to see you. That last clip from that father, impassioned, heartbroken, furious. I don't know how anyone can defend a man being arrested 39 times and let back repeatedly out onto the street to eventually graduate to murder. Who crafts these policies? Who defends these policies?
Well, God, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and Dagan tonight. You know, that hearing today was gut-wrenching. It was eye-opening. And you said it. How could anyone defend the process that led to and allowed these killers to be out there? We obviously had gathered there because of what had happened with Iryna, but the stories that we heard and the testimonies that were delivered today, none of us will ever forget them. And it's just unbelievable that there are those that are unwilling to look at the facts and see the reality that this is indefensible, the process that has played out.
Congressman, there needs to also be a call to action on it's not mental health. It is the, care for the dangerously, seriously mentally ill. And I point to the man who murdered Iryna, because if you look at just North Carolina, that North Carolina ranks 47th in the nation among the number of state psychiatric hospital beds. Per 100,000 people, it's 46. And between 2016 and 2023, North Carolina cut the number of beds, state psychiatric hospital beds in that state, by 90%. And it's a problem that's been going on for decades, where the states are not motivated financially to have these beds in place. And the people in the hospitals and the people in law enforcement are not motivated to make sure that these dangerously mentally ill people get psychiatric care. So what happens is the psychosis untreated psychosis turns into something that is unpredictable and deadly.
I don't disagree at all. I recognize that there is an issue and there is a conversation to be held about the mental health situation that we face, and that we have to have a way of incarcerating these folks to get them help, to get them what they need. But the truth of the matter is the process that became very clear in Charlotte was the fact that you had an individual that had been arrested 14 times, had spent 5 years in prison. It was a known fact that he had schizophrenia. And yet when he sat before a magistrate simply had him sign a piece of paper stating that he would show up for a hearing when it happened. And this was less than a month before he went on that train. And when Iryna stepped into that train and sat down, obviously from the video, not really even noticing the person sitting behind her as his head was propped up against the window. And that individual became a killer within moments and stabbed her in the neck. The problem was a serious breakdown in the process. And I'm very grateful that the General Assembly in North Carolina has already stepped forward. They've already passed Iryna's law, and it now sits on the desk of Governor Josh Stein. And he has dodged the question when asked, are you going to sign this into law? Because as we heard in the hearing today, there are a number of things. That was a question that I had asked. What are the things that take place with Iryna's law? And one of the men that was there, that Mr. Woody, that was actually testifying, was able to lay out the things and the steps that would take place that would deal with this cashless bail issue that is a serious issue across our country.
Well, that assailant, and I'll just note, he was in a hospital, in an emergency room, and called 911 because he was delusional, and he was essentially arrested for delusional beliefs. And rather than being committed and hospitalized because he was delusional, he was just given a ticket. And therein lies what happened. But we want to jump to this. Stay right there, Congressman. Just stand by. We want to move on to the looming government shutdown. The president meeting earlier today with congressional leaders from both parties in an attempt to hash out an agreement. It comes as the White House continues to lay the groundwork for mass layoffs come Wednesday.
Our very own Madison Allworth joins us live from Washington, D.C. with the latest on this story. Madison?
Guy, Dagan, the meeting wrapped up, but no agreement was made. So discussions continue as congressional leaders try to reach that spending deal before October 1st at midnight. That's the deadline for when a government shutdown would happen. After the meeting, Democrat leaders seemed confident that President Trump had heard their point of view, which is that none of their point of view is in the current spending bill.
I think for the first time, the president heard our objections and heard why we needed a bipartisan bill. Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before.
In the case that they cannot get to a deal, the Office of Management and Budget sent a letter to agency leaders asking them to identify programs with no alternative source of funding if the government shuts down. A difference this time around is that the federal employees who would typically be furloughed would be permanently laid off. And when it comes to negotiations, Republicans are keeping their message simple. If a bill isn't passed, it's the Democrats' fault.
If they shut the government down, not only are troops unpaid, federal workers, and all the services that everybody relies upon, but the WIC program, the nutrition program, women, infant, and children, they will not get that program, will not be funded. FEMA won't be funded. We have hurricanes off the coast of the United States right now. This is serious business. You have telehealth, you have mental health services, all that's funded by the government would stop if Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats have their way.
Guys, time is running out, but both sides, like I said, continuing discussions to try to forge a deal. Remains to be seen if they can get it done before October 1st. Vice President Vance says he's not hopeful. He does not think a deal will get done. Dagan, Guy?
Madison Allworth, thank you so much.
All right, so let's bring back North Carolina Congressman Mark Harris on this topic of shutdown politics and this showdown here. We saw maybe not too much progress, it seems, at the White House today. Congressman, I'm just trying to figure this out because the Democrats for years said the most reckless and irresponsible thing you could do is shut down the government, and to attach some sort of unrelated policy to the government funding is not acceptable, and we need a clean funding mechanism. That is exactly what Republicans have passed in the House. It's exactly what they always demand, but now it seems like they're going to contradict their own long-held position on this and demand a bunch of other things. Do they have a plan here? Do they have an end game here?
You know, that's a great question. That's a question that Chuck Schumer is going to have to answer, because you're exactly right, Guy. I mean, you have laid it out beautifully. We all know what we are facing right now. And Republicans took a step that we feel like in good faith we passed an extension that goes to November 21st, a clean CR, so that we could continue passing appropriation bills over the next 6 or 7 weeks. That would give us an opportunity to continue to make progress in that direction. And again, there's nothing partisan about that. There's nothing political about that. And yet the Democrats, their play is to come in and say that unless you do this, 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 and this, which amounts to about $1.5 trillion, basically they're asking us to undo everything that we tried to accomplish in the working families tax cut or the one big beautiful bill, whatever you want to call it. And the bottom line is they're holding hostage the American people. They're holding hostage keeping our government open. And that's not acceptable. So I'm not sure what their end game is, but we have passed ours and we put it in their court, and they're going to have to make the decision whether to own this shutdown or not.
The Republicans didn't cut Medicaid in the big, beautiful bill. You merely slowed the growth over the next 10 years to more than $1 trillion. You simply removed illegal aliens from Medicaid, and you're making some individuals actually have to work for it. You hold fast, you don't budge. So be it if the Democrats want to shut the government down. That's on them, Congressman. That is on them. Exactly. Congressman Mark Harris, you be well. Thank you, sir.